For more than 3 centuries, the people who lived along the shoreline carried a warning about the water. They did not fear the storm. They did not fear the wave. They feared something they believed was living underneath the surface, waiting. The tribe that once held this land was called the Cat Nation, and the name they left behind, the name this entire lake still carries today, translates in their own language into 2 simple words: longtail. They named the water after a predator. These were people who had lived beside this lake for countless generations. They knew its moods better than anyone who has lived here since, and they treated it with a caution that the settlers who came later mistook for simple superstition. So ask yourself one question as we go. What did the people who knew this water best understand about it that the newcomers refused to believe until it was far too late? For a long time, that sounded like nothing more than superstition, a story told to keep children away from the edge of the shore. But here is the part nobody talks about. They were right. Not about a monster, about the lake itself. Lake Erie is hiding something, and it is far stranger than any legend. It is a truth written into the shape of the water, and once you understand it, you will never look at this lake the same way again. Because somewhere out on that water, a ship longer than a football field vanished more than 100 years ago. No storm was ever proven to have sunk it. No wreck has ever been found. We will come back to that ship and to what happened to the more than 30 men aboard it. But to understand how a lake this calm could swallow a steel ship whole, you first have to understand the LIE. Because Lake Erie does not look dangerous. Of the 5 Great Lakes, it is the friendliest. It is the warmest of all of them. It is the first to invite you in during the summer and the first to freeze over when the winter comes. More than 11 million people live around its shores, in Ohio, in Pennsylvania, in New York, in Michigan, and across the border in Ontario. They swim in it, they fish in it, they build their homes to look out over it. Lake Erie feeds one of the most productive freshwater fisheries anywhere in North America. Look at the scale of it. The lake stretches almost 240 miles from one end to the other. Its shoreline runs for more than 850 miles, curling past 4 American states and 1 Canadian province. And the land that drains into it is the most densely populated of any of the Great Lakes. Roughly 1 out of every 3 people who live anywhere in the entire Great Lakes region lives in the watershed of this single lake. They drink its water. They work on its docks and its harbors. They have raised whole cities along its edge, Cleveland and Buffalo and Toledo and Erie. By every measure that a visitor can see, Lake Erie is the most settled, the most tamed, the most familiar of the 5 inland seas. It is the shallowest, the warmest, and by every appearance the gentlest of the inland seas. And that is exactly the problem, because gentle is the disguise. Underneath the calm surface is a body of water that has killed with a speed and a savagery that has no equal on the Great Lakes. And the reason why is the one detail almost nobody thinks about. It comes down to a single number. Lake Erie is shallow, not a little shallow, astonishingly shallow. Its average depth is only about 62 feet. At its very deepest point, it reaches just 210 feet. To put that in perspective, Lake Superior plunges to well over 1,000 feet. Lake Erie is the only one of the Great Lakes whose deepest point still sits above sea level. And in its western third, the part of the lake nearest Toledo, the average depth is barely 24 feet. Picture that. A body of water stretching almost 250 miles from end to end, and along much of its length you could sink an ordinary house and still see the roof. That shallowness is why the water warms so quickly in the spring. It is why the lake is so full of life. and it is the exact reason it can turn into a killer in a matter of hours. Here is the physics that the old warnings understood long before anyone could measure it. In a deep lake, when the wind pushes on the surface, the energy of that wind has somewhere to go. It travels downward, it disperses, and it spreads out through hundreds of feet of water below. Lake Erie does not give the energy anywhere to go. The bottom is right there. So when the wind blows across this lake, the force is not absorbed, it is concentrated. It is packed into a thin layer of water that has nowhere to escape. The result is a wave unlike almost anything else in fresh water. These waves do not roll in and break the way ocean swells do. They stack up on top of one another, steep and short and closely spaced, rising almost vertically in a matter of seconds, and they have torn apart wooden ships that the open ocean might have carried safely through. Researchers who study the lake describe it in almost the same words every time. Even a moderate wind can raise steep, closely packed waves that punish small boats. Weather that would barely trouble a deep lake can turn Lake Erie into a wall of rough, breaking water faster than a captain can react, calm to chaos in a single afternoon. Sailors on the Great Lakes had a name for the worst of it, the white squall, a sudden, violent burst of wind that could rise up out of a flat and calm surface with almost no warning at all. It could heel a boat over and put her under before anyone aboard understood what was happening to them. On most bodies of water, that kind of event is rare. On Lake Erie, it is written into the shape of the water itself. But the waves are only the first way this lake kills. There is a second, and it is quieter. Because Lake Erie is the warmest of the Great Lakes, people let their guard down. They dress for the warm air, not for the cold water beneath it, and in the colder months, that water can fall close to the freezing point while the air above it still feels mild. According to safety researchers who study drownings on the lake, cold water shock can seize a person within a single minute of going under. The muscles stop answering, the breath will not steady, and the earliest stages of hypothermia can take hold in as little as 10 minutes. A person who falls from a boat on Lake Erie is not fighting the distance to the shore. They are fighting the clock, and the lake keeps very fast time. And there is another trick the lake plays, one so strange that when people see it for the first time, most of them do not believe it is real. Imagine for a moment picking up a bathtub full of water and tilting it slowly to one side. The water rushes to the low end. The high end goes dry. And then, when you set the tub down, the water sloshes back and forth and back again for a long time before it finally settles. Now imagine that bathtub is a lake almost 250 miles long. That's what happens on Lake Erie. Meteorologists have a name for it. They call it a seiche. According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, a seiche occurs when strong, sustained winds shove the water toward one end of an enclosed body of water and pile it up. On Lake Erie, the geography makes it dramatic. The lake is oriented from the southwest to the northeast, and so are the strongest winter storm winds. When those winds scream across the water for hours, they push the entire lake toward Buffalo on the eastern end. The water climbs, and on the western end, near Toledo, the lake does something that looks impossible. It drains away. The bottom of the lake is exposed. Boats are left sitting in the mud. The shoreline retreats, sometimes by hundreds of feet, as if the water has simply decided to leave. During a single strong event, the water can rise 7 feet higher than normal on one shore while dropping 7 feet on the other at the very same time. The record difference between the two ends of Lake Erie is more than 16 feet. 16 feet of water gone from one end of the lake and stacked onto the other. And then, when the wind finally eases, the water comes back. It rushes toward the end it was drained from, overshoots, and begins to oscillate, sloshing back and forth across the whole lake for hours, sometimes for days, before it finds its level again. Most of the time, a seiche is a spectacle, a strange and beautiful thing to witness, but not always. Let me tell you about the year 1844. On a night that October, the wind drove a seiche toward the eastern end of Lake Erie with a force that people at the time could barely comprehend. The water rose into a wave more than 22 feet high. It slammed into the city of Buffalo and breached a seawall that stood 14 feet tall, as if the barrier were not even there. Roughly 77 people were killed that night, and the same surge of water shoved so much ice against the head of the Niagara River that it choked the flow completely. For a time, the ice acted as a dam, and Niagara Falls, one of the most forceful waterfalls on the continent, slowed to a trickle and, in places, stopped. Think about what that takes. A wind blowing across a lake so shallow you could almost wade across parts of it, generating a wave tall enough to overtop a seawall, drown a city block, and briefly silence Niagara Falls. That is not a story. That is recorded history. And it is a direct consequence of that one number we started with, the shallowness. Stop for a moment and think about what that really means. Everything you have ever been told about Lake Erie, that it is the calm one, the warm one, the safe one, is true. It is true right up until the moment it is not. Because the very shallowness that makes this lake so gentle is the exact same shallowness that makes it so deadly. The two are not separate things. They are the same fact, wearing two different faces. And the people who lived on the shoreline learned to read both of those faces a very long time ago. So now we arrive at the thing the lake has been hiding all along. Because the lake is shallow, because the storms rise so fast, because the waves are so steep and so close together, Lake Erie has spent more than 200 years swallowing ships. And here is where the scale of it becomes genuinely hard to believe. Nobody knows exactly how many wrecks lie on the bottom of Lake Erie. The record keeping from the early years was incomplete, and many ships simply vanished with no witnesses left to say where. The estimates run from 500 wrecks at the low end to more than 2,000. Researchers with Ohio Sea Grant, who have worked for years to document the lake's lost vessels, have confirmed and located only about 277 of them so far, which means the rest are still down there, unfound, unmapped, waiting in the dark. Think about that for a moment, somewhere between a few hundred and a couple of thousand vessels lost to a single lake. And we have located fewer than 300 of them, which means that for every wreck that has been found and named and mapped, there may be 5 or 6 more still hidden on the bottom of Lake Erie, their stories lost, their crews never accounted for. A Cleveland-based team of underwater explorers put it in a way that stops you cold. They told an Earth science team at NASA that Lake Erie may hold a greater density of shipwrecks than almost anywhere else on the planet. Greater, they said, than even the waters of the Bermuda Triangle. And when they were asked why, the answer was not a mystery. It was not a curse. It was not a creature. Storms and waves, they said, are the single greatest reason ships went down in Lake Erie. The same shallow water, the same fast, steep, violent seas. The lake was doing exactly what its shape forces it to do. And the lake has help. In its shallow western end, near the islands off Sandusky, the water hides a maze of rocky shoals and reefs that lie in wait just beneath the surface. An Earth science team at NASA described this stretch as especially hazardous to ships, a shallow field of rock and shoal scattered with small islands. Near one of them, Kelly's Island, about 10 miles off the Ohio shore, explorers found what may be the oldest wreck in the entire lake. A small vessel called the Lake Serpent lost in the year 1829 while carrying a load of limestone. When it first appeared on the sonar screen, the explorer who found it very nearly dismissed it as a rock because he thought it was far too small to be a shipwreck. It had been resting on the bottom, in the dark, for nearly 200 years. And here is the part that should unsettle you. The floor of Lake Erie is scattered with shapes exactly like that one. Every year, teams dragging side-scan sonar across the bottom of this lake pick up new targets, dark forms on the screen that no one has yet been able to name. Some of them sit anonymous for decades, some for well over a century. Only this past winter, a wreck that first appeared as an unidentified shape in the year 2022 was finally given a name, more than 150 years after it sank. It turned out to be a stone-hauling schooner called the Clough, and it had taken a team of explorers more than 10 years and 248 miles of scanned lake bed just to identify that one single ship. There are more of them still down there, shapes on the sonar with no story attached to them, waiting. But of all the things this lake does to the ships it takes, the strangest is what happens next. Because Lake Erie does not just swallow these vessels, it keeps them. In the salt water of the ocean, a wooden wreck does not last. It is hollowed out by shipworms, a kind of saltwater creature that eats through timber until almost nothing is left behind. Those creatures cannot survive in the Great Lakes. Here the water is cold, it is fresh, and down in the deep it holds very little oxygen. Wood does not rot the way it should. Iron does not rust the way it should. According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the cold, fresh water of these lakes has left some of the best preserved shipwrecks found anywhere in the world. Ships that went down more than a century ago still stand upright on the bottom, their masts reaching up into the dark, their cargo still strapped in place. Divers have opened a sunken cabin and found the dishes still sitting in the cupboards. And because fresh water preserves flesh far better than salt water does, the lake does not only keep the ships, it keeps the people who went down with them. But even this preservation has an enemy now. In the 1980s, invasive zebra and quagga mussels arrived in the Great Lakes. Today, they carpet the wrecks by the millions, and the quagga mussels give off an acid that slowly eats away at metal. Archaeologists are now racing to find and record the lake's lost ships before the mussels erase them for good. The lake protected these wrecks for a century and a half, and now, quietly, something is taking them back. There is one more thing hidden in this water, and it is quieter than all the rest. Out in the central basin, in the deeper water between Sandusky and the Pennsylvania shore, something changes every summer that scientists once struggled to explain. Down at the very bottom of the lake, the oxygen slips away. Fed by decades of runoff from the farms and the cities along its shores, the lake grows a slow bloom of algae that drifts downward and, as it settles into the depths, quietly draws the oxygen out of the water around it. And across a vast stretch of the lake bed, thousands of square miles of it in some years, the water simply grows still. Scientists call it a dead zone. The fish move on to other parts of the lake, and what they leave behind is a deep, cold silence, a hidden country on the floor of Lake Erie where the water lies motionless and untouched. It was not always here. It grew as the cities and the farms grew, a slow change spreading across the floor of an ancient lake. As if, once a year, the lake were closing a door. As if it were drawing one more part of itself down into the quiet, out of reach and out of sight. Consider a single morning in the year 1850. A passenger steamer called the Griffith was carrying more than 300 people across Lake Erie when fire broke out on board. The crew turned the burning ship toward the shore, and safety was agonizingly close, only a few miles of open water away. They never reached it. Accounts of the death toll differ, but somewhere between 240 and nearly 300 people lost their lives that morning within sight of land. Picture that for a moment. Some of the passengers, in those final minutes, could see the trees standing on the shore. Some of them, very likely, could pick out the individual houses. They could see safety, and the narrow band of cold water between the burning deck and dry land was still more than they could cross. That is the kind of lake this is. It will let you see the shore. It simply will not always let you reach it. It remains, to this day, one of the deadliest disasters in the entire history of the Great Lakes. That one was fire, not storm. But it tells you something about this lake. Even on a calm day, Lake Erie does not forgive a mistake. And when the weather does turn, the lake becomes something else entirely. In November of the year 1913, two enormous storm systems collided directly over the Great Lakes. The event is remembered now by the name the survivors gave it, the White Hurricane. For days, the storm hurled blinding snow, winds near 90 miles an hour, and waves that towered 35 feet high across water that, in the case of Lake Erie, is on average only 62 feet deep. Across all the lakes, that single storm sent more than a dozen ships to the bottom and killed more than 200 people. These were not small boats. They were the largest freighters of their age, crewed by men who had sailed these waters for their entire lives. The storm did not care. It overwhelmed steel ships hundreds of feet long and rolled some of them completely over, trapping their crews beneath the surface. On Lake Erie, a lightship, a vessel whose entire purpose was to sit anchored in one place and warn other ships away from danger, was torn from its post. It went down with all 6 men aboard. The very ship sent to protect sailors from the lake was destroyed by it. But of all the ships this lake has taken, one of them refuses to be found. And it is the reason people still say that Lake Erie is keeping a secret. This is the ship we opened with. On the morning of December the 7th, in the year 1909, a steel car ferry called the Marquette and Bessemer No. 2 left the harbor at Connaught, Ohio. She was 338 feet long. She was built of steel. She was carrying a crew of more than 30 men and a single passenger on a routine 5-hour run across the lake to Port Stanley in Ontario. She never arrived. A winter gale caught her on the open water, with winds near 75 miles an hour and waves that left her nowhere to hide. And then this enormous steel ship simply vanished. In the days that followed, searchers found her wreckage scattered across the lake. They found one of her lifeboats drifting 15 miles off the Pennsylvania shore. Inside it were 9 frozen bodies. None of them were dressed for the cold. The evacuation had been so sudden, so desperate, that the men had fled into the winter storm with nothing to protect them. A 10th man, the accounts say, had lost his mind before the end and thrown himself into the water. But the ship itself, the 338-foot hull, was never found. Not that winter, not in the century since. Divers on both sides of the border have claimed to find her, and every single claim has fallen apart. The Marquette and Bessemer No. 2 is now known as the Holy Grail of Lake Erie shipwrecks, the largest ghost ship on the lake, lost in some of the shallowest water in the entire Great Lakes system, and still, to this very day, hidden. Some of the older residents of Connaught will tell you that on cold December nights, if you stand at the lakefront and listen, you can still hear her distress whistle carrying across the water. That part is a story, but the ship is real, and it is still down there, somewhere, waiting to be found. And here is the detail that should send a chill down your spine. None of this is ancient history. The lake still does this. Every single winter, the same southwest winds still push the same shallow water toward Buffalo. In recent years, seiches have surged the water at Buffalo up by 7 and 8 feet, coating buildings and trees in thick freezing spray, turning an entire shoreline to ice, while 200 miles away, The western basin was drained down to bare lake bed. The National Weather Service has recorded some of the lowest water levels in the lake's history during these events. In December of the year 2022, a single winter storm drove the water in the western basin down to the lowest level ever recorded there, draining the lake away from the shore as if someone had pulled a plug. Witnesses on the eastern end said watching it arrive was like watching the storm surge of a hurricane, except in the dead of winter, with the spray freezing solid the instant it touched anything it landed on. And when the wind finally died, the water did not simply settle. It rocked back and forth across the entire lake, hour after hour, and in the largest events for days before it came to rest. The same phenomenon that killed 77 people in 1844 is not a thing of the past. It is a thing of this winter, and the next one, and the one after that. Which brings us all the way back to where we started, to the cat nation, to the people who named this water after a long-tailed predator. Across the Great Lakes, the peoples who lived on these shores shared a belief. They spoke of a great cat that lived beneath the surface of the water, a spirit that ruled the deepest and most dangerous stretches of coast, the coves, the hidden channels, the places where the water turned treacherous. And this creature, they believed, had one terrible power above all others. It could summon the storms, it could raise the waves, twist the currents, and pull boats and the people in them down beneath the surface. Travelers were so wary of it that when they paddled past the places it was said to live, they would throw offerings into the water to keep it calm. And there was a deeper layer to the belief. The great cat was said to guard what lay hidden beneath the water. To take from its domain was to invite its fury. Some things, the old stories warned, the lake was simply not willing to give up. A guarded place. A forbidden one. Sound familiar? Now it would be easy to hear all of that and dismiss it, to call it a myth, a frightening story from a world before science. But look at what those people were actually describing. A force that lived in the water. A force that made the storms rise without warning. A force that took the strong and the careful alike and gave nothing back. They did not have the word seiche. They did not have instruments to measure wave height or wind speed or the depth of the basin. But they lived on this shoreline for generations. They watched calm water turn to killing water in the space of an afternoon. They watched the lake rise up and reach inland and then pull back and expose its own floor. And they understood, in the only language they had, a truth that science would not fully explain for hundreds of years. This water is different. This water is dangerous in a way that the deeper lakes are not. Respect it, or it will take you. We tend to think of ourselves as the ones who finally figured this lake out. We have the satellites overhead. We have the depth charts and the sonar. We have forecasts that can see a storm coming from days away. But the truth those instruments finally confirmed is the very same truth the cat nation carried in a single word for 300 years. That this water is not like the others. That it will give, and then, without warning, it will take. They did not need the science. They had the lake. They wrapped that knowledge in the shape of a great cat beneath the waves, and into the name of the lake itself, Longtail. So the next time you stand on the shore of Lake Erie, on a warm and quiet day, with the water lapping gently at your feet, remember what you are actually looking at. You are looking at the shallowest of the Great Lakes, a lake that warms fastest, freezes first, and turns on you faster than any of the others, a lake that can drain itself from one shore and pile itself 16 feet high on the other. A lake with hundreds, maybe thousands of ships still resting in the dark beneath the surface. A lake that the people who knew it best named after a predator and warned each other about for 300 years. A lake that swallowed a 300-foot steel ship whole and has refused, for more than a century, to give her back. Lake Erie is hiding something. It always has been. It is not a monster. It is something far more patient and far more real. And it is still down there, waiting for the wind to change. The people who named this lake understood something we are only now confirming with sonar and satellites, that some water is not meant to be trusted. If you want to see the mysteries still hidden in the rest of the Great Lakes, the ships and the secrets that make Lake Erie look almost gentle by comparison, that story is waiting for you on the screen right now. And if this changed the way you look at calm water, subscribe before you go so you are there when we find out what the next lake is hiding.